Hello guys, so let's discuss the next topic of vectors, which is addition of vectors. And how do we add two vectors and what are the basic properties of addition of vectors? We'll discuss that. So the basic three laws used for adding two vectors are, first one is triangle law, the second one is polygon law, and we also have a parallelogram law. So we'll discuss all these laws one by one. So first let's discuss the triangle law. Now the addition, the very basic law for addition of vectors is triangle law. How do we use that? If we have two vectors, this is A vector and this is B bar. Now if I'm trying to add these two vectors by triangle law, the basic condition which we need for adding these two vectors is that the head of this vector or the terminal point of this vector will be joining the tail of B vector. Now what do I mean by head and tail? The initial point I am referring to as tail and the final point or the terminal point is head. Now the head of A vector should join tail of B vector. Now this is the basic condition of addition of vectors by triangle law. If we are joining head of A vector with tail of B vector, then the addition of these two vectors, we know that the addition of these two vectors will be a vector from here to here, because the vector will give us the shortest path, right? It is only direction dependent. It is not path dependent. It is path independent. I'll get to this term path independent again only. But let's see first. Now this will be the resultant vector. This is the resultant vector, A vector plus B vector. Now if two vectors are getting added, the third side of the triangle formed by these two vectors will give us the addition of the two vectors. Now this will represent the sum of two vectors, A vector and B vector. Now you can write the statement. The first one is that head of A vector should join the tail of B vector, and the second line is closing side of triangle will give the resultant vector. So these are the two important things you need to remember. Now let's next discuss the polygon law. But first write one thing, that a vector is path independent. So the vector does not depend on the path. It is not depending on the path it took for adding A vector and B vector. We just join the initial and the terminal points to get the final vector or the resultant vector. And it only depends on initial and final points. Only depends on initial and final points. So you must get this picture pretty much clear in your head, that how to apply the triangle law. If I have a triangle like this is first, second and third, A vector, B vector, C vector. Can you tell me how the triangle law is getting applied here? Now the triangle law, is it A vector plus B vector is equal to C vector? Now in this case, you must be clear about this fact that two vectors can only be added by triangle law if head of one vector is joining the tail of the other vector. Now in this case, head of C vector is joining the tail of A vector. Therefore C vector and A vector will get added to give the resultant, which is B vector. So we can say that C vector plus A vector is equal to B vector. Now similarly, can you tell me in this case? This is A vector, B vector, C vector. Can you tell me in this case which two vectors are getting added? Now see, the basic condition is head of one vector should join the tail of the other vector. Now in this case, head of one vector A vector and the head of C vector are joining, so they are not the vectors to be added. Now in this case you will see that head of B vector is joining the tail of C vector. Therefore these are the vectors getting added and this will be the resultant vector. So we will say in this case